Hey, another lecture here on audio processing. So this is a topic that's going to be super useful for understanding Pro Tools and understanding how to sweeten audio and just make existing recordings sound their best. I'm going to be explaining some concepts. There's a few videos that will reinforce some of the ideas that we're talking about, and I'm going to jump in and out of the PowerPoint structure to show you a couple of things on how to apply audio processing techniques to, a basic voiceover and music recording in Pro Tools. So I'm going to jump back and forth between these things, and we've got quite a bit of ground to cover. And again, foundational stuff, but topics that we're going to build on as you continue learning about audio. So why do we bother doing this processing stuff anyway? We can use fancy microphones and record with the best practices, and we can get some pretty cool sounding stuff. Why bother processing? Because we want to do other things. Maybe there is a problem that occurred, somebody coughed, or there was an electrical issue, right? So some fuzz was introduced or distortion was introduced into the recording. We might need to find some ways to deal with this. So as audio people, we're not only creative, but we're problem solvers. We got to figure out ways. What tools do we have at our disposal, whether it's in the recording process or in a digital audio workstation like Pro Tools, that we can use to fix some issues? I want to make you dangerous with Pro Tools to be able to do that sort of stuff. Maybe something was recorded well, but we wanted to make it sound the best. Maybe that person has a little bit of a plosive speech tendency or some sibilance in their S pronunciation. We can do some processing techniques to sort of tame those issues and make a person or an instrument sound their best. And creatively, that's almost like a signature thing that we can achieve, right? Certain music mixers are known for the way that they can make a vocal stand out above the rest, or a specific sort of drum sound. So those are sorts of things that you'll never be able to gain those things. You'll never find something like that if you don't experiment with the tools at your disposal. So that's why I encourage you to get going on that Pro Tools first so you can follow along with some of these things, and you can experiment in your spare time and with doing these projects. So the different types of processing, we're going to go through three sort of different categories of processing techniques. Those three things are dynamics processing, frequency processing, and dimensional processing. All right, so we're going to start right at the beginning with what I said was dynamics processing. Okay, got a picture of a gate here. A gate is a dynamics process that you can put audio through. And essentially what that means is we determine a specific threshold of volume, and if the audio that we've recorded does not pass that threshold, if it's not as loud as the gate that we set, then absolutely no audio goes through. So it'll be silent until it reaches a particular threshold. So we're essentially blocking audio signals that don't quite make the mark. And an example of that might be if you have, say, a electric guitar player, and there's certain sections of a song where they're not playing, and you don't want that sound to go through. But sometimes a electric guitar has just sort of a feedback, sort of distorted electrical hummy sound to it, right? So what we can decide to do is set a gate. So as long as they're not like strumming the strings and creating like the actual sound we intend, they won't open the gate essentially. So we won't hear those sounds at all. It could also happen, and this is where we'll see it in our example, is that there could be just sort of some noise from like an air conditioner in a room or something, and you want to eliminate that unless someone's actually speaking. So let's take a look real quick at my Pro Tools session. I've got this cheesy little Chrysler commercial that I've read here, so we'll listen to a tiny little bit of it. When kids see something they like, they know it immediately. Parents, on the other hand, need to see more to be impressed. So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town & Country to... Okay, nothing really crazy, cool, or terrible about that. It's a Chrysler commercial. So in Pro Tools, I'm going to expand my voiceover track and solo it, so it's the only thing that I'm hearing. I'm also going to use the T and R, the keystrokes for magnifying or zooming in on something. So I'm just listening to this area right here.
When kids see something they like, they know it immediately.
I'm looking at this space in between things when I'm not actually speaking. You can see there's some small waveforms there. So I'm not in a soundproof environment. If you can crank up your own volume at home, you'll be able to hear sort of the fuzziness
When
in
kids see
between.
something they like, they know it immediately. Parents, on the other hand, need to see more to be impressed.
So what I'm going to do here is create a gate and show you just exactly what that will do. So I need to set a threshold. And what that threshold is the volume level that I'm saying, well, the sound that I want to hear has to be higher than this, otherwise it's getting blocked. So let's hear what happens.
When kids see something they like, they know it immediately.
Now, if I set the threshold really, really low, then we're not going to hear anything.
When kids see something they like, they know. When kids see something they like, they know it immediately. Parents, on the other hand, need to see more to be impressed.
See, so what's happening is, well, I'm saying that my threshold is so high, actually. So this audio, none of it is loud enough to pass through the gate.
When kids see something they like,
Just little pieces of the speech that were emphasized enough. So what we want to do is find the sweet spot and dial back the threshold so we hear the intended voices, but we eliminate the sound in between.
when kids see something they like, they know it immediately. Parents, on the other hand, need to see more to be impressed.
All right, so I'm just going to put this on loop play
When
and
kids
keep
see
trying to
something
find
they
the
like,
spot.
they know it immediately. Parents, on the other hand,
You see that this orange line right here is called gain reduction. That's how much volume we're removing because the actual audio is not opening the gate. And notice now this will go away when the voice is speaking, and then all of a sudden in these little blank spots, you'll hear dead silence instead of that fuzziness, and we'll have lots of gain reduction. Take a look.
when kids see something they like, they know it immediately. Parents, on the other hand, need to see more to be impressed.
So the gate allows me to clean up my audio, part of that problem solving, right? So I didn't have a perfectly soundproof room, but this allows me to effectively remove the noise when the person is not speaking. So that's an awesome tool to have. And I think you're going to notice as we explore more of these audio processes that we're going to have a tremendous difference for the way this sounded to begin with and the way it sounds at the end. So let's go back to our lesson here. The next stage of dynamics processing is compression, kind of like the opposite of a gate. What it does is it allows us to reduce dynamic range. So if you remember from the last lecture, dynamic range is the difference between the softest and loudest parts of a sound. So compression, we're taking the softest parts and the loudest parts and squishing them together so that they come closer. So when you apply compression, the original result is going to be a quieter sound, because really what you're doing is you're taking the loud sounds and pushing them down and reducing the dynamic range and pushing the loud parts closer to the quiet parts. Then what we can do, think about this, if we've got soft and loud, we push the loud parts down. Then if we crank the volume knob, they move together. So we've got overall a fuller, thicker sound. And what we're doing there is applying makeup gain. That's when we add volume back in after we've compressed. So let's take a quick look at a video that explains this just a little bit further.
In this video, we are going to look at an overview of compression. Compressors are very valuable as they allow us to reduce the dynamic range of a signal, which is the difference between the loud and soft parts of a signal. By compressing different amplitudes closer together, we are able to create a more level mix. So let's take a look at the compressor. There are several different control parameters available to us. The first thing we need to look at is the power button, or more accurately, the insert button. This is rather self-explanatory. Next, you will see an input gain, where you can adjust the level at which the signal comes into the compressor. As with any audio device, you want to make sure you have a good strong signal for the compressor to function properly, but not so strong that you clip. After the gain stage is the threshold. The threshold tells the compressor at what decibel level to start compressing. Anything lower than the set threshold remains unaffected, while anything above is compressed. Next, we can fine-tune this threshold with the knee. The softer the knee, the more gradual the transition from compressed to uncompressed. The harder the knee, the harsher the transition. Now that we have told the compressor what signals to compress, we have to tell it how much to compress them. We do this with the compression ratio, which determines the amount. For example, a 2-to-1 ratio would reduce the part of the signal that is over the threshold by half. The next two things to set are your attack and release time. The attack time controls how long it takes for the signal to become fully compressed after it passes the threshold. The release time is the exact opposite and controls how long it takes for the signal to fully decompress after it drops below the threshold. After you have adjusted all the compression settings, the signal's overall level will be somewhat reduced. The output gain allows you to make up for the lost amplitude as a result of the applied compression. Now that you have an overview of how to use a compressor, we can take a look at specific scenarios where compression is important. Thanks for joining me today, and please...
Alright, I know there's a lot of information in these videos, but I like how they visualize everything. Really the best way that you're going to learn about this is by critically listening when you're making adjustments to these parameters and experimenting yourself. So let's just go over a couple of the things that we really need to take away from the video. The threshold, these are different parameters of compression. The threshold is a volume level that we determine where we want compression to begin. So we'll say if anything is past -10 decibels, then we're going to start compressing it and pushing it down. It's sort of like, I heard an audio person put it into perspective like this, and I think it really works. It's like when you're driving the car, but you're driving your mom somewhere, and you crank up the volume, and you pass your mom's threshold of volume, and then she starts to compress it by turning it back a little bit, right? So you're jamming in the car, but you pass the threshold that your mom would prefer, and she turns the level down a little bit. She's compressing it for you. So it's kind of like automatic volume control. It's really what compression is. We set a certain level, and we decide, well, once we get past this, we're going to start taming it. We're going to start dialing it back a little bit. The ratio is at what rate are we compressing. You can have really intense ratios, or you can have not so intense ones, and they will sound different. So that's why it's so important to experiment with these. Attack and release, how quickly compression begins once the audio passes the threshold, and release, how quickly compression releases once the audio goes below the volume threshold. So let's jump out of the lecture again and head to Pro Tools and see what we can do with compression. So I've got gate on here, I'm adding compression. And what I'm doing here is I'm adding real-time processing, non-destructive processing to my audio. So I'm applying these processes to the audio, but the audio itself isn't changing. It's just being put through this process.
When kids see something they like, they know it immediately.
So what I want to do here is increase the ratio and drop the threshold so we can really hear what's going on. Remember, the original thing that's going to happen with compression is going to be the volume is going to get lower.
When kids see something they like, they know it immediately.
And here's what it sounded like before. So I'll do a before and after. Before.
When kids see something they like, they know it immediately.
And then after.
When kids see something they like, they know it immediately.
And notice when I have the compressor turned on that I get a meter reading here on my gain reduction. That's telling me how much I'm compressing. How many decibels am I squishing this audio down?
When kids see something they like,
about -20. So that means that I have 20 decibels of gain that I can introduce back into this. And it should sound much louder and much more full than it originally did.
When kids see something they like, they know it immediately. Parents, on the other hand, need to see more to be impressed.
All right, but now I'm starting to introduce that noise again. So it's going to change how I want to use my threshold, my gate. So we can...
Parents, on the other hand, need to see more to be impressed.
All right, so that works out pretty well. So that changes things considerably. Let's listen to where we've come so far. If I introduce the music, and we'll do a before and after. Here's a before.
When kids see something they like, they know it immediately. Parents, on the other hand, need to see more to be impressed.
All right, and here's the after.
When kids see something they like, they know it immediately. Parents, on the other hand, need to see more to be impressed.
So the only thing that I'm noticing is happening is my gate is starting to chop things a little bit. So that means that you have to dial it back. Because if you think about it, the end of some speech might might have less volume than the syllables that you emphasize. So you have to account for that. But we're starting to sound bigger and fuller, which is exactly what we want. All right, so back to our lesson here. We went through compression already. So we'll skip to the next page. A limiter is the final dynamics processing that I want to take you through, and it is a fancy compressor that prevents audio from exceeding a set volume threshold. So it effectively turns that threshold, that imaginary level of volume, into a ceiling. So that audio cannot pass it whatsoever. In traditional compression, the audio level passes the threshold and it is compressed or squished down by a ratio, a rate that we determine. What this is saying is that forget the ratio. As soon as you hit the threshold, we're just going to chop off your audio right there. And I've got a visual way to represent this. There's a video that I found on YouTube with some girls doing some cheerleading moves. And it sort of puts this into perspective exactly. So the little girl that's doing the cheerleading move, that's doing like the toss, consider her audio being sent through a limiter. This is what happens.
Okay. You ready?
Just wait for it.
1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2. Hands up. 5, 6, 7. 1, 2. Ah! Oh!
What did they think was going to happen, I wonder? So anyway, when you use a limiter, you're doing the same type of activity that you would with a compressor, except you're just saying, once you get to this imaginary threshold, this imaginary line of volume, I'm just not going to allow you to pass through there at all. Whereas a traditional compressor, if you took this video, for example, and instead of a limiter, you called it a compressor, then that ceiling there would be made out of like a trampoline or something, and her head would go through it a little bit, but then the trampoline would push her back. It would compress her back down. So that's the difference between a limiter and a compressor. I really should write these girls a thank you letter. I've showed this for years. Okay, moving on from dynamics to frequency processing. The main part of frequency processing is going to be equalization. So you can adjust frequency content to shape or tone your audio. And I'll show you what I mean by that after we watch this video that sort of goes through an explanation of the various aspects of equalization.
To look at an overview of an equalizer. EQing is the process of changing a specific frequency in the audio spectrum of the signal. There are two basic types of EQs, graphic and parametric. The parametric EQ is more common, so we will focus on that. The first parameter to adjust is the frequency. The frequency control is used to sweep through the spectrum so that you can find the specific frequency you want to manipulate. The second parameter that's adjusted is the gain. The gain is used to boost or cut the selected frequency. This will change the overall sound of the selected signal. The third parameter is the Q, also known as the bandwidth. The Q is used to adjust how wide or narrow the frequency range is. Think of a wide Q as a slow, gradual hill, and a narrow Q as a tall, steep mountain, with the frequency selection being the center peak. The three parameters that we just discussed make up what we call an EQ band or filter. Many consoles have 4 EQ bands that you can make adjustments to. Those are the low, low-mid, high-mid, and high frequencies. Another option that most consoles have is a shelf filter. A shelf filter allows you to select a specific frequency and then cut or boost all frequencies above or below the selection. Shelves are available on the high or low end of the spectrum. One final feature of an EQ is a high-pass and low-pass filter. The high-pass filter is used to block all frequencies below the set frequency, and the low-pass filter is used to block all frequencies above the set frequency. Using these parameters, the EQ is able to adjust the frequencies of the audio signal. Thanks for joining me today. Please check out our other church technology.
Okay, I know lots of words and things. It's true. But equalization is so important for the problem-solving aspect that we were talking about. Almost every issue that you wind up hearing with an audio recording, you can address with equalization to a certain extent. Okay, so we've got the volume level, right? The gain, and what we can do is we're basically adjusting the volume level of specific frequencies. That's what we do with an equalizer. All right, so the frequency is the selected band or section of that frequency range of 20 to 20K, right? 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. And the Q is the shape of a curve. So there's two different kinds of equalizers. The one that's pictured here is actually called a graphic equalizer. And you might see this on a fancy stereo system or something. And each one of those dials represents a band of frequencies, right? A section of that 20 to 20,000 hertz spectrum. And the fancier the graphic equalizer, the more dials you're going to have, right? The more control, because each one of those dials represents a range of frequencies. The other option is a parametric equalizer, which is what we're going to see in Pro Tools. And that is preferred because it allows you to have more control. And I'll show you exactly what a parametric EQ looks like. Looks like this, just like it did in the video, and there's certain sections, right, that I can adjust. So what I would be doing here is adjusting volume of specific frequency ranges. Instead of, on a graphic EQ, I'm sort of limited to those dials and stuff. Here, I can adjust these slopes with my Q, right, make those smaller or wider, all that stuff. And in Pro Tools, we can use presets for all these different effects modules that I'm showing you. So in this area right here where it says preset, you can look under factory default and notice, well, these are put into categories and I'm dealing with vocals and it's a male voice. So let's solidify those male vocals and it's going to give me a small boost in the low to mid frequencies. Do you see that?
So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country.
So that's doing some things right there, and you could bypass, of course, and listen to it before and after. I'm going to go back to the factory default setting where nothing else is happening. And I want to explore this topic here, high and low pass filtering. So you can allow or filter through high or low frequencies and block the rest. Now, what does that mean and why would that be important? I'll visualize it with the EQ tool here. So we're still just going to listen to the voice now, and we'll listen to this next section so my brain doesn't explode from hearing that little, the beginning part.
So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country to its...
Okay, so what happens if I apply a high pass filter? So here's my high pass filter area, HPF. I turn it on, and watch what happens when I adjust the frequency. That's blocking out all low frequency sound. So a high pass filter allows the high frequencies to pass through it, but it blocks the low frequencies. So let's hear what that sounds like.
So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country to its consumer loyalty awards, it's a sign that says no matter where people are going.
So a couple of things are happening. First, it sounds like the bottom dropped out because there's no low frequency sound, and my voice all of a sudden starts to turn hollow. But if you notice, a lot of the extra noise that we were catching there goes away. So there's some rumbling in the low frequencies that maybe we don't need so much. So the idea of using this would be to listen and start to increase that filter until we start to hear the quality of the voice be compromised.
So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country to its consumer loyalty awards, it's a sign that says no matter where people are going, the Chrysler Town and Country is the one that keeps bringing them back. So when you add the fuel economy of
There, I think it found just a little bit of low end that added a little bit of depth and character to my voice. So then I backed off just a little bit. And if I look at the low pass filter, it's just going to be on the other end of the spectrum here. And I'm going to do the exact same thing and just make adjustments to it until I can hear the quality of my voice be compromised.
So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country to its consumer loyalty awards, it's a sign that says no matter where people are going.
Notice that it starts to sound like somebody threw a blanket over me?
So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country to its consumer loyalty awards, it's a sign that says no matter where people are going.
So what I'm doing here is I'm effectively eliminating any frequencies on the high or low side of the spectrum that I just don't need. So anytime that I can remove frequencies that I'm not using or don't need, that's going to be a good thing. Okay, back to it. All right, the final thing here, reverb. So dimensional processing. One of the last things that I like to do is add reverb. And reverb is how an acoustic space reacts to sound. All right, what does that sound like if it were in a particular space bouncing off walls and things like that? To put it into perspective, your voice would sound much different in a soundproof recording studio than it would in the front of a giant cathedral, right? And that's often how we describe reverb, is by the names of the places that they're trying to represent. So in reverb, we have control over several things. The decay, which is how long reverb lasts after the sound is made. So how long will it take for that sound to go away, to stop reverberating, stop echoing from the virtual reflections of the walls. The size of the room itself. So when we explore the reverb in Pro Tools, you're going to notice that you have control over the size of the space. And the wet-dry mix, which is something that we have control over, that says, well, this is what the sound sounds like on its own. This is what it sounds like with reverb, and we can pick some point in between. So a combination of both of those sounds. All right, so that was the last one, but I wanted to show you what reverb sounds like. Here's the reverb unit in Pro Tools. And right now I have a large hall that I've applied to this. Let's listen to it before one last time.
So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country to it.
And here's it with reverb.
So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country to its consumer loyalty awards, it's a sign that says no matter where people are going.
So I can adjust the decay time, and that would make the reverberations here. When I stop, you can still hear it.
Loyalty awards.
It takes 4.5 seconds for that to completely die down. I can change that, of course, and I can change my wet-dry mix. So maybe I want to hear a little bit more of like my actual, my real voice in there.
You add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country to its consumer loyalty awards. It's a sign that says no matter.
So you get a little bit of that reverb quality that's still there, but you mostly get the original voice. This is how people that are making, like, say, an advertisement, like a radio ad or something, where it sounds like someone's thinking inside their head. This is how they do that. Listen.
So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country to its consumer loyalty awards,
it sounds more like you're thinking it yourself. So that can be a useful thing to do in like small doses.
So when you add the fuel economy of the.
It adds a little bit of life to it. So let's hear what this sounded like before. And then we'll do after.
When kids see something they like, they know it immediately.
All right, here we go.
Parents, on the other hand, need to see more to be impressed. So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country to its consumer loyalty awards, it's a sign that says no matter where people are going, the Chrysler Town and Country is the one that keeps bringing them back.
Sounds all a little bit better, right? So you got to make sure that everything that you're doing to your audio is going to make it sound a little bit better. The very last thing that I want to show you about processing is so far what I've been doing is adding processing to the voiceover. But I'm not limited to that. And another thing that I haven't done, you notice that I've got voiceover track and music track. What I need and am missing is a master track. So I'm going to create one of those now, a stereo master fader. And that gives me this other track down here, and I'll expand it a little bit. And what this is measuring, and what it's going to affect if I apply processing here, is all the audio that is in my Pro Tools session gets funneled into this place. So like up here, I'm applying effects right here, compression and gate and EQ and reverb and everything. That's only being applied to my voiceover track right here. If I apply something to an effects module on my master fader, that's both of these pieces of audio being filtered into my master track, and then the process being applied to those combined. So one of the things that we talked about earlier with the cheerleading girls was the compressor. So I'm going to use the Pro Tools standard limiter. I'm sorry, was what I meant to say, a limiter, and use the preset that says radio limiter. And let's listen to before.
When kids see something they like, they
And
know
listen
it
to what this
immediately.
does.
Parents, on the other hand, need to see more to be impressed. So when you add the fuel economy of the Chrysler Town and Country to its consumer loyalty awards, it's a sign that says no matter where people are going, the Chrysler...
It just makes it pop a little bit more, having that extra volume. We're compressing some. Well, we're limiting, right? So we're compressing with infinity to 1 ratio. So that's helping out a lot. So super important that we begin to explore audio processing techniques. The easiest way to do it is to just throw something into Pro Tools first and start experimenting with all the different things that you have available to you. You know, I was using all these different things that I wanted to make sure that I covered in the lecture and everything. But you can experiment with all the other tools that are available to you. I mean, there's other things in here, like pitch shifting is always fun. You know, I can change the pitch of my voice, right? So here it is, normal.
When kids see something they like,
Like, they know it immediately.
Need to see more to be impressed. When kids see something they like, they know it
Right, so you can go full Chipmunk or Darth Vader with it. Have fun, experiment around with this stuff, because the more you just explore, the quicker you're going to get the hang of all this stuff. All right, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.